Good morning, people, and welcome to the summer term. I hope everyone's had a good Easter and is back ready to move ahead with the course. Just before we start, I think the plan is we'll continue with the course for a little bit longer, and then we'll take a little break where we'll go back over reviewing everything we've done since September. And trying to develop our essay writing skills, going back over some of the content and coming up and writing some more meaty essays on some of the ideas that we've covered. But we'll keep going for a few more lessons, maybe this week and next week, on the syllabus, and then we'll start on that review. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Gilbert Ryle's objection to dualism. Very much Gilbert Ryle, he follows in the footsteps of Wittgenstein. He's part of that philosophical school which very much sees language as the key to unlocking many of the philosophical dilemmas and problems. He was born in Brighton. He studied at Oxford University. He then went off during the war, Second World War, and was a linguist, helping to decode German messages and that kind of thing. And then he came back, and just after the war, he wrote his big book on the concept of mind and his big contribution to philosophy. And it's very much attacking dualism and trying to point out the mistake that dualism has made. And he believes Descartes and other dualists make what he calls a category mistake. So again, he's from the school of philosophy that thinks that everything is about understanding language and meaning and the logic that's going on in our concepts and ideas. And by understanding that, we can shed light on this problem and show where the misunderstanding is when we talk about the mind. He introduces, or he characterises in quite a fun way, that the mistake of Descartes is that we end up with this notion of a ghost inside a machine. And so dualism, as portrayed by Descartes, is this idea that, we are a mind, so we are these minds that are floating around and may then enter the body, which then is the machine. So this notion, there's Casper the Friendly Ghost, and in a car driving around. So under dualism, we get this idea of two separate substances, the mind and the body, which is like that we are ghosts driving machines, which you might think is an appealing notion, but Ryle thinks it's obviously ludicrous. And he tries to unpick what this is, and he says the category mistake that we're making is that when we talk about the mind, we're just getting it wrong. So we talk about the body, and we can understand how we talk about the body fine, but when we talk about the mind and aspects of mental life, thoughts, memories, feelings, the things that we normally ascribe to the realm of the mind, we just get it wrong, and we put them in the wrong type of category. So we are using these terms incorrectly. And the example he gives is one way of explaining this is to explain the category mistake. He talks about a foreigner in England. Now, of course, this was written in the 1940s. It doesn't sound quite so good to characterise like this these days. So I'm going to say a visitor to England. So imagine a visitor comes to England in the 1940s, and he goes out and he might see a game of cricket going on in many villages across the land. A very English pastime and a scene that you would have seen in many places. So this visitor, he inquires, what is this strange game of cricket? And there's Gilbert, who then explains a little bit about it. And the visitor has some questions. He says, who's responsible for the batting? So there's the batsman in there. Who's responsible for that? And Sir Gilbert explains, well, that person over there, he's the one doing the batting, and the others will get a chance to bat. So he's explaining who does the batting during the game. And then the visitor says, oh, who's responsible for the bowling? And again, Gilbert explains how it works and who does the bowling and the mechanics of the game. And the visitor then learns about the different roles in cricket, who's the wicket keeper, etc., and who are the fielders. So he explains all the different roles, and that's all fine. We're not making any mistakes. But then the visitor says, who's responsible for the team spirit? Who's doing that? And at that point, obviously the visitor is misunderstanding the term team spirit and is using it quite incorrectly. There's no person that's responsible for the role of team spirit. There's no one doing team spirit. In fact, team spirit rather describes a kind of a collective notion of how all the players are coming together and they're playing, they're batting, they're bowling, they're fielding in such a manner as to have great team spirit. So to think of team spirit as a role or a mechanics of the game is to misunderstand, and it's to make a category mistake. And Gilbert Ryle, so in that, so cricket, so batting and bowling, they're roles in cricket, whereas three is a characteristic of the team playing together. So they're quite different categories, different logical categories of what's going on. And Gilbert thinks that we've made that mistake, or Descartes made the mistake, because the mind is not a thing. And he thinks that when we're, in a similar way to the cricket, when we're talking about mental states, we're talking about the way people behave. We're describing their behaviour. And it's not actually describing a thing, that the mind is a thing. We're describing this is how people behave in a certain way. So when we say someone is angry, we're describing angry behaviour. So that person is angry. What we're not meaning, what's going on inside their head. Actually, what we're meaning is they're kicking over chairs, they're throwing down books, they're speaking fast, they're turning, they're getting really agitated in their speech. That is what we mean by being angry. When that person is concentrating, really what we're doing, we're saying is they're taking their time. They're not making any quick decisions. Their brow furrows in such a manner. So that's what Gilbert Ryle thinks. The mind is not a thing, but mind is really describing a type of behaviour. But let's think about this concept of category mistake in a bit more detail. So the notion that we're making a category mistake. This is another example of a category mistake. So have a look there in the field. If I say there are three things in that field, there are 2 cows plus a pair of cows. 3 things. So you can make that obviously argument, that logical argument, 3 things, 2 cows plus a pair of cows. But clearly it's wrong. There's a mistake, a logical mistake being made. And that's an example of a category mistake. Another example of a category mistake is what's going on here. Someone says, if I ask you, is the hole in the bucket? Is that hole in the bucket? And you say, yes, that hole is part of the bucket. Well, you're making a category mistake there. The hole isn't part of the bucket. There is a hole there, but you wouldn't say the hole is part of the bucket. It's not a thing in the bucket. It's an absence of a thing. So it's an absence of there being metal all the way around. There's a gap. So again, if you say that hole is part of the bucket, you're making a category mistake. And maybe people make category mistakes in all sorts of things when they're misunderstanding the words and the concepts that we're using. And Descartes, Ryle is saying that Descartes is making such a category mistake when he posits the mind as a thing. So Descartes in the Meditations, he goes on and talks about the complexities of other human beings. He talks about the fact they're using language, the fact they're being able to respond in dynamic and highly complex manners when things happen. And therefore, he then thinks, okay, well, what is inside this body that is doing this? It must be something, the only thing that could be inside a body, making it behave in such a way, must be a mind. So therefore, Descartes creates, I think it's in the 6th meditation, he then develops the notion, well, we can actually believe that other minds exist because of the complex behaviours we see in other bodies. And so what Ryle says is Descartes made a mistake here because, yes, he observes that there's complexity in how other bodies, other people behave. And they said, well, there must be such a special thing as a mind in there. But actually, well, no. Why must you posit a thing called a mind? Why can we not just analyse the behaviour of the other bodies? So Descartes' mistake is to see other minds as a type of thing. And going back to the cricket example, Ryle will argue, just like team spirit is a phenomena that's happening between people, team players working together, it's not a thing or a role precisely like the other aspects of cricket. So the mind must not be characterised as a thing, but rather as a manner of doing. So Descartes' category mistake is to see the mind as a thing rather than an understanding of human behaviour. Now, of course, this then begs the question: if the mind is not a thing, then what is it? And Ryle's solution is behaviourism, and to say that, well, the mind is behaviour, and actually the behaviourism is actually a section in the course we're going to come to. So I'd like you to maybe to have just a little look, basic research on behaviourism, but don't go into detail at this stage. So Ryle thinks that, the mind isn't a thing, but rather the mind should be understood in terms of the behaviour that we witness of other people and even ourselves. So that's his solution. But certainly, for the purpose of today, what's important to realise is that Descartes has made a mistake in calling it a thing. Now, it might be that you come to another view of, well, what the mind is. If it's not a thing, what is it? And how should we analyse the mind, if not to analyse it as a thing? But certainly, this is Descartes. So, in summary for today, Ryle believes that Descartes has made a mistake in his analysis of the mind. So Ryle is criticising Descartes and criticising dualism. Ryle is a physicalist. Okay, and his physicalist type is behaviourism. So Ryle believes that Descartes has made a mistake in his analysis of the mind. He believes that it's a logical category mistake in thinking of the mind as a thing, when in fact it should be thought of in a more sophisticated manner. He thinks the mind could be analysed in terms of analysing the behaviour of others. This is behaviourism. And the point for the purpose of the strain of argument one at the moment is that if the mind can be analysed in terms of behaviour, then the problem of other minds just simply disappears because we have direct access to the behaviour of others. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go through the textbook. It's page 242 to just the first bit of 244. So it's not a huge amount of reading. Just go through it, think then through the examples, then conduct a bit of further research on Ryle. And then once you've done that should take you maybe half an hour or an hour. Then I'd like you to spend just half an hour writing out a one-page explanation of Ryle's criticism of dualism. If you want to go further and start unpicking behaviourism, go for it. But at this stage, what matters is that you can attack dualism using Ryle's strategy. And of course, feel free to start thinking about why Ryle might be wrong, particularly if you think you're going to become a dualist.